My husband admitted he married me for my race, and I don't know how to move forward. I'm 30F, writing this because I feel lost and alone. I need to get my thoughts out somewhere, and I hope sharing my story might help me make sense of what I'm feeling. My husband, 28M, and I have been together for about 8 years, married for 3, and until recently, I thought we had a strong, loving relationship. We met working at an investment bank in Tokyo. I'm Japanese, born and raised, and he's American. He was in Tokyo for work after finishing college. I was new to the company when we met, and we quickly became close. He was charming, intelligent, and made me feel seen in a way that no one else ever had. We both ended up going to business school around the same time. I had the opportunity to attend a prestigious program in Japan, but he had his heart set on a school in the US, so I chose to apply there too. When I was accepted, I made the difficult decision to turn down the better university and move across the world to be with him. It felt like the right choice at the time. I was in love, and I thought we were building a future together. After graduation, we got married. My family wasn't thrilled about it. They were wary of me moving so far away and worried about cultural differences. But I convinced them that love transcends such things. I thought we were a team, and while life in New York has been challenging, I've been proud of the life we've built together. Until now. A couple of weeks ago, my husband's friend from business school came over for lunch. They've stayed close since graduation, and I've met this friend a few times before. It was a casual day, we were just hanging out at home, and I had cooked lunch for the 3 of us. I wasn't feeling well that day, a lingering headache and general exhaustion, so after serving the meal, I excused myself to lie down in the bedroom. I wasn't asleep, just resting, when I overheard their conversation drifting through the slightly open door. At first, it was typical catching up talk, work, mutual friends, and future plans. Then the topic turned to families. I heard my husband mention how happy he was to be married, and for a brief moment, it made me smile. But then his friend asked what made him decide to marry me, and my husband said something that shattered me. I married her because I've always had a thing for Asian girls since college. I froze. Did I hear that correctly? Surely, he couldn't mean that. My heart started racing as I replayed the words in my head. He didn't mention my personality, my values, or the life we'd built together. He reduced our entire relationship, our marriage, to some shallow preference for my race. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't. I stayed in the bedroom, silent and motionless, until his friend left. When my husband came in to check on me, he was his usual affectionate self, asking if I needed anything and suggesting we watch a movie together. I felt like a stranger in my own home. That night, I barely slept. I kept turning his words over in my mind. Was my marriage a lie? Did he only pursue me because of my ethnicity? I began questioning everything, the way he had always seemed fascinated by Japanese culture, his excitement when I cooked traditional dishes, even the compliments he gave me about my appearance. I started to see a pattern I hadn't noticed before. His bookshelf was filled with books about Japan, many of which he bought before we met. He followed multiple social media accounts that fetishized Asian women. I remembered little comments he'd made over the years about how he'd always found Asian women beautiful, and suddenly, those compliments didn't feel flattering anymore. What makes this even more complicated is that I can't talk to my family about it. My parents and extended family were against our marriage from the start. They worried about cultural differences and whether I would be treated with respect. My father, in particular, felt that my husband might never truly understand or appreciate our traditions. When we announced our engagement, my family reluctantly gave their blessing, but I could tell they weren't thrilled. Divorce is heavily frowned upon in our culture, and I know they would see it as a failure on my part, regardless of the circumstances. This leaves me feeling trapped. I can't turn to my family for support, and my closest friends here in the US are mutual friends of my husband, which complicates things further. Desperate for clarity, I turned to the internet. I posted on another subreddit, hoping for guidance, but the responses were mixed. Some people told me I was overreacting, that his comment was just a poor choice of words, and that I should let it go. Others validated my feelings, saying that fetishization is a serious issue and that I have every right to feel hurt. The conflicting advice left me even more confused. Was I overthinking this? Or was I finally seeing the truth of a problem that had been there all along? After days of turmoil, I decided to confront my husband. I couldn't keep the pain bottled up any longer. One evening, after dinner, I sat him down and told him I needed to talk about something serious. I explained that I had overheard his conversation with his friend and repeated his exact words back to him. At first, he looked confused. Then, as realization dawned, his expression shifted to one of guilt. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly. "It was just a dumb thing to say. I was trying to joke around with him." "But it wasn't a joke," I said, my voice trembling. "You didn't say you married me because you love me or because of who I am as a person. You said it was because I'm Asian. Do you know how that makes me feel?" He tried to backtrack, insisting that he does love me for who I am and that his comment didn't reflect his true feelings. But the more he talked, the more it became clear that he didn't fully understand the depth of my hurt. Since that conversation, things between us have been tense. He's apologized multiple times and insists that his words were a mistake, but I can't shake the feeling that they revealed a deeper truth. I've been distant, withdrawing into myself as I try to process everything. He's noticed, of course, and has been making extra efforts to show me affection, cooking my favorite meals, leaving little notes for me around the house, even suggesting we take a trip to Tokyo to visit my family. But none of it feels genuine anymore. I keep wondering if he's doing these things out of love or because he feels guilty. As much as I want to believe my husband's gestures come from a place of genuine love, my mind keeps circling back to his words. The comment he made to his friend wasn't a casual slip of the tongue, it felt like a glimpse into how he truly views me and our relationship. The days after our conversation have been strained. He's trying so hard to prove himself, but instead of feeling comforted, I feel suffocated. When he compliments me, I wonder if he's admiring me or simply the version of me that fits his type. When he makes plans for us, I wonder if he's trying to repair our marriage or distract me from the truth. I can't bring myself to confront him again, not yet. Every time I think about it, the same questions play on repeat in my head. What if he only married me because I'm Asian? What if everything I thought we had is a lie? The more I dwell on these questions, the more I find myself revisiting our relationship's history, looking for clues I might have missed. At first, everything seemed so perfect. He was attentive, kind, and genuinely interested in my culture. I remember the first time he brought up his fascination with Japan. It was early in our relationship, and we were at a cozy izakaya in Tokyo. He mentioned how much he loved Japanese food, how he'd studied Japanese history in college, and how visiting Japan had always been a dream of his. At the time, I was flattered. I thought his interest in my culture was a sign of how much he valued and respected where I came from. Now, though, I can't help but wonder, was he falling in love with me, or just the idea of me? In my search for answers, I started paying more attention to his social media activity. I noticed that a lot of the accounts he follows feature Asian women, many of them in ways that feel objectifying. The captions on some of the posts are full of stereotypes, focusing on how cute or submissive Asian women are, and it makes my stomach turn. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but seeing this pattern only deepens my suspicions. I can't shake the feeling that I'm just another piece of a fantasy he's been building for years. When I asked him about the accounts, he shrugged it off. "I just like the content," he said. "It doesn't mean anything, but to me, it feels like it means everything." With my emotions spiraling, I finally decided to confide in someone I trust. I reached out to Aiko, a close friend from university who also moved to the US for work. She's always been someone I can count on for honest advice. When I told her what my husband said, her reaction was immediate. "That's not okay," she said firmly. "You have every right to feel hurt." Her words were a balm to my wounded heart. For the first time, I felt validated. "But what do I do now?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I don't want to throw away my marriage, but I also can't ignore this." Aiko thought for a moment before replying. "You need to figure out if he's willing to do the work to change. This isn't just about apologizing. It's about him understanding why what he said was wrong and proving that he values you for who you are, not just what you represent." Her advice resonated with me, but it also left me with more questions. Was my husband capable of that kind of introspection? And even if he was, would it be enough to heal the cracks in our relationship? After days of agonizing, I decided to have another conversation with my husband. I needed more than an apology, I needed clarity. One evening, after dinner, I sat him down and told him how I was feeling. I explained how his comment had made me question everything about our relationship and how his social media habits were making it even harder for me to trust his intentions. He looked genuinely upset as I spoke, and for the first time, I saw tears in his eyes. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you," he said. "I was stupid and careless, and I hate that I made you feel this way." He went on to explain that his interest in Asian culture started in college, but he insisted that it wasn't the reason he fell in love with me. "You're smart, driven, and kind," he said. "You've always inspired me to be better. I love you for who you are, not because of where you come from." His words were sincere, but they didn't erase the damage. "If that's true," I said, "then you need to prove it. I need to see that you value me as a person, not just as part of a type you're attracted to." He nodded, promising to make changes. He agreed to unfollow the accounts that made me uncomfortable and even suggested going to couples therapy to work through our issues. It was a step in the right direction, but I knew it would take time to rebuild my trust. Since that conversation, things have slowly started to improve. We've had a few sessions with a therapist, which have been eye-opening for both of us. The therapist helped my husband understand how fetishization, even when unintentional, can be deeply hurtful and dehumanizing. He's also been making an effort to learn more about me on a deeper level. Instead of focusing on my cultural background, he started asking about my personal experiences, my dreams, and the things that truly make me who I am. I've seen genuine remorse in his actions, and for the first time in weeks, I feel a glimmer of hope. As the days turned into weeks, my husband's efforts to rebuild my trust became more consistent. It wasn't just the grand gestures or the promises, it was the little things that started to make a difference. He began asking me deeper questions about my life, things he'd never really explored before, like my childhood memories, my favorite books, and what I dream of doing in the future. These conversations felt different. They weren't tied to my culture or framed in ways that made me feel like an object of fascination. Instead, they felt like genuine attempts to know me as a person, not as a concept or ideal. Still, there were moments when my doubts resurfaced. Sometimes, I'd catch myself scrutinizing his actions, wondering if they were fueled by guilt rather than genuine love. Other times, I'd find myself bristling at small, innocent comments, unable to shake the fear that his old mindset might still linger beneath the surface. One evening, I brought this up during one of our therapy sessions. "How do I stop questioning everything?" I asked, my voice wavering. "Even when things feel good, there's this nagging voice in the back of my mind, telling me it's all just an act." Our therapist nodded thoughtfully before responding. "Trust isn't something that can be forced. It's built slowly, brick by brick, through consistent actions over time. It's okay to have doubts, and it's okay to take things at your own pace. What's important is that you both remain committed to open communication and growth." While my husband was working to change, I realized I had my own work to do as well. His comment had unearthed insecurities I hadn't fully acknowledged before. I began to question how much of my self-worth was tied to being seen as a perfect wife or meeting certain cultural expectations. In therapy, I opened up about the pressure I'd felt growing up in Japan, where the idea of preserving family honor and avoiding shame was deeply ingrained. Choosing to marry my husband against my family's initial wishes had been a bold step for me, but it had also left me feeling like I needed to prove the success of our marriage to justify my decision. "It's exhausting," I admitted one day, tears streaming down my face. "I feel like I've spent years trying to make this perfect life, and now it feels like it's all unraveling." My therapist encouraged me to focus on my own needs and desires, separate from my marriage. She suggested carving out time for activities that brought me joy and reconnecting with friends who made me feel valued for who I am. Slowly, I began to reclaim pieces of myself that I had lost along the way. One night, as we were winding down after dinner, my husband surprised me by bringing up something he'd been reading. "I found this article about how harmful stereotypes can seep into relationships," he said, his tone serious. "It made me realize that I have a lot of unlearning to do. I never thought of myself as someone who fetishized anyone, but looking back, I see how my behavior might have come across that way." Hearing him acknowledge this without me prompting the conversation felt like a breakthrough. For the first time, I saw that he wasn't just trying to fix things for the sake of our marriage, he was genuinely working to understand and change his own mindset. He also started making an effort to engage with my culture in a more thoughtful way. Instead of focusing on surface-level aspects, like food or traditions, he began asking me how certain customs shaped my values and identity. This shift made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt before. About 3 months after his initial comment, my husband suggested we take a trip to Japan to visit my family. At first, I was hesitant. I hadn't told my parents about what had happened, and I wasn't sure how they'd react to seeing us together. But the idea of reconnecting with my roots, and giving my husband a chance to see that side of my life more deeply, felt important. When we arrived in Tokyo, I was nervous. My parents had been polite but reserved when I told them about our visit, and I wasn't sure how the trip would go. To my surprise, my husband made a genuine effort to connect with them, asking thoughtful questions about their lives and showing real interest in their stories. One evening, my father pulled me aside. He seems different, he said quietly. More present. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. He's trying, I said simply. For the first time in years, I felt like my parents were beginning to accept our relationship, not just as a choice I had made but as something real and meaningful. As we returned to New York and settled back into our routine, I realized that my feelings toward my husband had begun to shift. I still carried the hurt from his words, but it no longer felt like a weight I couldn't bear. Instead, it felt like a reminder of how far we'd come and how much work we'd both put into rebuilding our connection. There are still moments when the past creeps up on me, like when I see an old social media account he forgot to unfollow or hear a casual comment that reminds me of our rocky months. But those moments are becoming fewer and farther between. I won't pretend that everything is perfect. Trust is a fragile thing, and while we've made progress, I know it will take time to fully rebuild what was broken. But I've come to understand that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other, every day, even when it's hard. My husband and I have committed to continuing therapy, both as a couple and individually. He's also started educating himself more deeply about the issues surrounding race, culture, and identity, which has helped me feel like he truly values me for who I am. As we continued therapy, both together and individually, I began to notice subtle but meaningful changes in my husband. He wasn't just making an effort to avoid the behaviors that had hurt me before, he was actively working to unlearn the biases and assumptions that had played a role in our struggles. He started reading books and articles about the experiences of people from different cultures, focusing on the dangers of fetishization and the importance of seeing people as individuals rather than stereotypes. He even joined a discussion group at his workplace centered on diversity and inclusion. What stood out to me the most wasn't just his participation in these activities but the way he shared what he was learning. Instead of lecturing or seeking praise, he approached our conversations with humility, asking questions and admitting when he didn't fully understand something. I didn't realize how much I was missing, he admitted one evening. I thought my interest in your culture was a good thing, but I see now that it's about more than just liking something. It's about respecting and understanding it, and you, on a deeper level. His willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and grow from them gave me a sense of hope. While the hurt from his initial comment still lingered, I could see that he was genuinely committed to becoming a better partner. At the same time, I was learning to rediscover myself. For so long, I had poured so much of my energy into being the perfect wife, trying to balance cultural expectations with the reality of living in a new country. But this experience forced me to confront my own needs and priorities. I started making more time for things that brought me joy, painting, journaling, and reconnecting with old friends from Japan. I also joined a local community group for Japanese expats, where I found a supportive network of people who understood the unique challenges of navigating two cultures. One of the most healing moments came when I shared my struggles with the group. I had been hesitant to open up, fearing judgment or pity, but their responses were filled with compassion and understanding. Many of them had faced similar challenges in their relationships, and their advice helped me feel less alone. "You're stronger than you think," one of the women told me. "And the fact that you're both willing to do the work says a lot about your relationship. Don't forget to give yourself credit for that." As my husband and I navigated this new chapter, it was the small moments that began to rebuild my trust in him. One day, while we were out for a walk, he pointed to a tree that reminded him of the cherry blossoms we'd seen on a trip to Kyoto years ago. "That was one of the best days of my life," he said. "Not because of where we were, but because of how happy you looked." His words caught me off guard. For so long, I had associated his affection with his fascination for my culture, but this felt different. It wasn't about Japan or cherry blossoms, it was about me. Another time, he surprised me with a date night centered on one of my favorite hobbies, painting. He had booked us a private session at an art studio, complete with a bottle of wine and soft jazz playing in the background. "I wanted to do something that's all about you," he said. These gestures weren't flashy or grand, but they felt thoughtful and personal. They showed me that he was paying attention to who I am as a person, not just the parts of me that aligned with his past interests. Over time, the tension in our relationship began to ease. We started laughing more, sharing silly inside jokes, and spending lazy Sundays cooking together in the kitchen. The spark that had drawn us together in the first place was still there, it just needed to be reignited. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching an old movie, my husband turned to me and said, "I know I can't undo the hurt I caused, but I want you to know that I'm here for the long haul. Whatever it takes, I want to keep earning your trust." His words brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. While the road ahead would still have its challenges, I knew we were on the same path, walking toward a stronger future together. As we continue to move forward, I've come to understand that healing isn't linear. There are still moments when doubts creep in, or when an offhand comment makes me second-guess his intentions. But those moments are becoming fewer and farther between, and they're no longer the defining feature of our relationship. We've set new goals for ourselves as a couple, from traveling to new places to starting a family someday. But we've also made a commitment to keep growing individually, recognizing that a strong partnership requires two whole, fulfilled people. I've started to let go of the need for perfection, in myself, in my husband, and in our marriage. Instead, I've embraced the idea that love is a journey, not a destination. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's messy, even when it's hard. This experience has been one of the most challenging chapters of my life, but it's also been one of the most transformative. It's taught me that relationships aren't defined by the absence of mistakes but by how we choose to address and grow from them. My husband's comment hurt me deeply, and I'll never forget how it made me feel. But I've also seen his remorse, his willingness to learn, and his commitment to change. Those actions have shown me that our marriage is worth fighting for. As for me, I've learned to prioritize my own worth and voice in ways I never have before. I've found strength in vulnerability and discovered that it's okay to demand respect and understanding from the people you love. While the path hasn't been easy, I'm hopeful for what lies ahead. Together, we're building a relationship that's more honest, intentional, and resilient, and for that, I'm truly grateful. I, 30F, a Japanese woman living in the US, overheard my husband, 28M, say he married me because he has a thing for Asian girls. This shattered my trust and made me question our entire marriage. After confronting him, he expressed genuine remorse and committed to therapy and personal growth, working to unlearn harmful stereotypes and rebuild our relationship on a deeper foundation. Meanwhile, I've focused on reclaiming my identity and setting boundaries, rediscovering myself outside of the marriage. While healing hasn't been easy, we've made progress together, and I'm hopeful for a more honest and intentional future with him.